today is a very special day for me because I get to start a bunch of seeds. The first seeds for the 2026 gardening season. Here in central Indiana, my last frost date is around April 25th to maybe the first week of May if we're lucky. So I am not really starting these seeds now in January to plant these guys in April. That's not the case. The flowers that I'm going to be starting today, foxgloves, snapdragons, and strawflowers, are cool flowers, meaning they can handle the cold really, really well. So they're going to be going out very early in March. The main way that I'm going to be starting all of these seeds are using soil blacks because they work really, really great for me. But I know that a lot of people just found my channel because they want to learn about starting seeds, and not all of you feel comfortable with soil blacking. So today I'm just going to show you maybe a couple of different ways that you can start this year starting your own seeds. They're super easy, no technique or no buying extra tools involved. So hopefully if you're on the fence about starting those flowers or starting those vegetables for your own garden, maybe this is the inspiration that you needed. These are the soil blocks, the soil blockers really, that I use for starting a lot of my seeds. I tried a few years ago with soil blocks, only to find out years ago that they weren't really for me in the way that I like to start my seeds. But last year, when I started a bunch of cut flowers for selling at my roadside stand, I found the need to start a bunch of seeds all at once. In soil blacks, especially this little guy. This is the 20 blocker 3 1/4 inch. This is the one that I use a lot and I love it. Now this is the bigger size. This is the soil blocker that makes the 5 blocks at once. So a lot of my flowers, I will be starting them with this guy, but most of them will be with the smaller soil block. Personally, when I'm using the soil blocks, I like to use a combination of 2 trays. One is the mesh tray, which is going to be the one holding the soil blocks, and the bottom is a tray without holes. I like this combination because when I water soil blocks, sometimes I am not really good at figuring out how much water I need, and sometimes I go a little bit extra. So if I have soil blocks here growing and I added a little bit too much water to the tray, it is super easy for me to pick this up and empty this guy out. Now I know that a lot of people use a flat tray to use or to hold all of their soil blocks, and this is perfectly fine. Now the only thing that worries me in the way that I do things is that if I'm not paying attention, if I add a little bit too much water, the way that I will have to tilt this to get the water, the extra excess out, it will be hard. Now, if you're starting soil blocks and you maybe don't want to have to buy trays because this is your first year and you don't know if you really want to spend the money or you don't want to do the investment, you can use trays that you have with your takeouts. Also, you can use trays that you have when you buy vegetables at the store. The clear containers with the clear rounds work perfect. This right here, it was part of a takeout. I have been saving this guy just to show you. I made drainage holes just because I don't want to have this tray flat like by itself. But this right here, it will be a perfect dome to keep that humidity intact. So I'll probably start a bunch of things here to show you how easy it is to do. But also, if you eat eggs in your home and if you buy the cardboard containers for those eggs, you already have these guys. I did go ahead and made holes at the very bottom just so the water is accessible a little bit faster and better. But this right here, I can start single varieties, or I can start use a bunch of seeds at once, trying to get them to germinate for moving them up later to bigger containers. I am going to be studying this variety king size orange of strawflowers in these containers. And the first thing that I'm going to do is obviously make a label, because it will be easy to think that I'm going to remember what this is in the future. But if you're starting a lot of seeds at once or during different times, just make sure to label everything. And the soil that I'm using is just regular potting mix. I do not use any seed starting mix for starting my seeds anymore. I just don't think that for myself it makes a huge difference. So I use a good quality potting mix, and I add a little bit of water to the mix. I don't like to use dry medium, so adding a little bit of water to make it more manageable, it's always a good thing. And I am not going to start a lot of the seeds of this variety. So I am going to go for maybe 3 to 5 seeds for each little pocket. And I am going to try to separate the seeds. I am not just going for dropping 2 or 3 in the same little spot. And these are older seeds, so I am hoping that I still have some sort of good germination. But if I get at least half of these, that will be okay, because I am starting more strawflowers of a different variety, and I am going heavy for those. On the instructions, it tells me that the seeds need light to germinate, but I still do want to make sure that I don't bury the seeds, but I want to make sure that the seeds have contact with the soil. And what I have been doing for the last couple of years is that I purchase a very, very fine type of vermiculite to put on top of all of my seeds. Now, if I have a seed that needs dark to germinate, I go heavy on the layer of vermiculite. But in this case, if the seeds I am trying to germinate need light to germinate, I am going very, very thin on the layer. So all of the seeds that I start do get a layer of vermiculite, which allows them to stay moist a little bit longer, and they don't dry out quickly. And because I know that these guys need light to germinate, I am purposely going to keep them underneath my LED lights. I will have those lights on for at least 12 hours during the day, and I have them on a timer, so I don't have to worry about making sure to turn them on or off. So here it is. This is the finished product, my label, vermiculite. And now my main concern for these guys for the next few days is to try to keep them nice and moist. Having that portion of the moisture completely taken care of helps the seeds to germinate faster. And normally, since I have my system here in place, I will place this guy on a tray and I will use a dome. This is a dome that I have from Bootstrap Farmer, and I will just place it on the tray, and that helps with keeping the moisture in. This is very easy for me to do. Now, if you're just starting out and you don't have a dome, you can easily just get a plastic wrap that maybe you already have in your kitchen, and you can keep these guys nicely intact. This is what I will do if I didn't have a dome. Now I am making sure that the plastic wrap is not touching the soil. It's definitely not keeping things flat, so that they can stay moist a little bit more, a little bit longer. Now here is the second way that I am going to start more strawflowers, and this guy is a choice mix from Johnny's, and I am going to do basically the same thing. I am going to add soil to this container. I do have drainage holes for this container. I have plenty of drainage holes, so I don't have to worry about the water not having a place to escape. And I am using the same potting mix with a little bit of water added to it. And I actually went and kind of patted this a little bit down. I am not putting too much pressure, but just enough so that I don't have any air pockets. And again, I am just going to try to spread the seeds so that when it comes time to separate, I don't have just a big chunk in one area. And if you're wondering about the depth of the containers and how come I don't fill these guys all the way up with soil, the answer is super simple. I don't need to waste any soil. These guys are going to be here just for very little time, and not for them to get big enough so that I can move them into bigger containers so they can continue growing. So this is not going to be their homes until I transplant them outside. These guys are just going to be here until they're big enough for me to move them up to different containers. And I am going to do the same thing. I am going to add a very thin layer of vermiculite. And yes, the seeds need light to germinate. Strawflower seeds do prefer light to germinate, but they also need to be in contact with the soil that you're using. And having a little, very, very thin layer of vermiculite gives them that benefit. And it also helps them with keeping them moist. So, and I add just like the very cheap, thin tape, masking tape. I have that here. And this lid that came with it, I don't even need to seal it. I am not going for a completely sealed container, but I am just going to leave this on like that, and it's perfect, and it's going to go right under my LED lights. Now, when it comes to preparing for soil blocks, the process is just a little bit different. And I am going to show you how I'm going to prepare the soil. The soil that I use for soil blocks is really the same potting mix that I use for making or using pots or containers or any other type. And that's the reason why I love this mix. This is the large bag. I did a test last winter before my 2025 season started with seed starting, and I did a test comparing a few potting mixes. One of them was for these, and long story short, this really made a huge difference comparing the potting mix that I had been using for years and the seedlings that I was getting with this. Same seeds, same lighting, same amount of water, but the seedlings that I got from using this potting mix were unbelievable, healthier and stronger. So for 2025, this is what I use for starting all of my seeds. And the great thing about this is that I don't have to add anything to it. I don't have to add nutrients or anything else to make soil blocks. I can use this straight out of the bag. Well, almost straight out of the bag. I need to sift, and by the way, this little thing that I'm using, which I'll probably update to one of those green trays. I'm still deciding if I need one or if I just want one. This container, I think they use them for feeding horses. I'm not really sure. But I got this sifter, and somehow the sifter just fits perfectly on these containers. I have this in orange. I have the top in orange, and I believe that I have a pink one too. Can't remember, but this fits nicely. So the only reason why I'm going to sift this right now is because making the very tiny 3¼ inch size soil blocks, if I have something in this potting mix, which is not super chunky, but if I have something in there that is bigger than these soil blocks, it's just going to be on the way. So I only sift this, guys, if I'm making the small soil blocks. If I make the bigger soil blocks, I don't have to worry. I use these guys. I don't have to sift anything. So this is the heavy bag because it was a better deal. Now, if you are wondering where I am getting it and how I'm ordering it, it's really hard for me to get it here locally in central Indiana. Actually, there are no places where I can find it locally. I have to order it online. But there is a place in Louisville, Kentucky where they sell it. And that's where I'm getting the rest of my bags. This is perfect. Again, nothing much out of it, but if there was something there that was just a little bit too big for the tiny soil blacks, that will probably be on the way. So that is the only extra step that I'm taking. Now here it is. Look at this beautiful, beautiful potting mix. I love this, and I'll have to drive 3 hours to see if I can get a few bags, or I'm going to be waiting to see if I can find a good deal online where I get maybe a little break on the shipping. But this stuff really makes a huge difference on my seedlings. If you have never done soil blacks before, the key is really having the soil that you're using, whether you're using something out of the bag or doing your own mix or your own recipe. The key is really to have this loaded with water. And just like anything else, you're going to have to probably practice and fail a couple of times. If you have the time to do a few tests and make a few blocks before you actually need them, that will be a good thing to do, because once you find the consistency or the amount of water really that the soil needs to have in order to have your blocks nice and strong, it makes a huge difference. Honestly, I think that's where a lot of people fail trying to make soil blocks the first time. More than likely, they're not adding enough water to their mix. Let me show you. When I grab a little chunk of soil, the one that I think maybe has plenty of water, if I grab it and it doesn't really do anything as I squeeze it, it's not there yet. And yes, I'll probably get comments like, you need to be using gloves, yada yada, but it is what it is. Now, this is one of the main reasons why I like to use these tubs. Not only they're super flexible, they're not super deep, but also if I needed to move this somewhere else, I can easily just grab it and take it with me like this, instead of having to pick up the whole thing in one piece. If I grab again a chunk of these guys and I squeeze it, and if it starts leaking water everywhere as I squeeze it, then it's perfect. Look at this. Hopefully you can see it on the video. So this is perfect. So I am going to grab my soil blocker. There's nothing in there. And first I am going to be making, sure that I have an area of concentrated soil enough to fill the depth of my soil blocks. So I am not squeezing anything yet. I'm just grabbing this thing as a whole and just pushing it down. Right now, the main thing that I want to do is I want to fill all of the spaces. And you can see I have very good coverage there. And again, this is something that you're gonna have to try to do for a few times before you get it right. Now, I feel pretty good about this part. If I had a little bit too much here at the bottom of this soil block, I will probably try to remove it with a flat spatula, but right now, I feel pretty good about everything being nice and flat in there. I'm going to make sure that I have space on each side for when I water in the future, for the water used to go in between. I am pushing this down, and then I am lifting as I hold it down. These guys are beautiful. Look at the soil blocks. Let me show you a little bit closer. before I even try to release the soil blocks, I want to make sure that where I'm placing it, that I have space from the other set of blocks so that when I water, the water can easily just run through it. If I place these guys right next to each other here, which you can do if you want to, and then start a different set with an opening, but right here for me is great because I have a little bit of an opening there in between each set. That way, when I water, it's just a lot easier. And again, I am going to be pushing this die down, holding the whole thing down with the blocks, and this is the part that I'm going to be lifting as I push down gently. And there they are. Now this entire tray is going to be for my snapdragons, and I am going to be making about, let's see, about 40 of each variety that I have here. So I have a total of about 200 snapdragons, 200 plants here. And I am going to just label them so that I make sure that I don't confuse them when I plant them outside. But also I'll probably do a second round of snapdragons here in about, I will say in about a month, of the ones that can handle the warm weather a little bit better. I am planting groups 2, 3, and I believe that's all I have, groups 2 and 3 at the same time, these early in the year, but then later I'll just get the warm varieties ready. And just so I don't confuse myself, I am going to cover these guys with vermiculite. Now the great thing about pelleted seeds is that I can handle them better, and I can choose to have 1 or 2 seeds of snapdragons for each little container, or each little block in this case. This is what I'm going to use to start my foxgloves. I have 2 varieties, and I'm going to just choose 2 containers with drainage holes. These are the 5x5, and I'm going to have the bottom containers for bottom watering. Now, because I am going to have these guys on a 10x20 tray, I could easily just place this straight onto the tray. I wouldn't need the bottom trays, but sometimes I find myself just wanting to water one instead of the whole tray with everything that the tray is holding, and these guys are perfect for just compartmentalizing these little guys. And I am going to add a little bit of water to the potting mix that I'm using for these 5x5 containers, but not nearly as much as I would for starting soil blocks. So I have 2 varieties here. I have Dalmatian peach and I have camelid lavender. Now I have 50 seeds of each. I do not need 100 of these guys. So I am going to go maybe 20 of each. Again, I'm trying to separate them, thinking for future me and how hard these are going to grow if I have them together. These are a lot easier to see. Now again, these seeds also do need light to germinate, so I am going to go very thin on the layer of vermiculite. And if you didn't know, vermiculite holds moisture, so in a way I'm providing a layer of moist when I keep this vermiculite wet, that is. These guys are ready to go under the LED lights. I am going to turn on the lights for these 2 trays here. And I might add my dome to the snapdragons, and I might add a little layer of plastic wrap for the foxgloves here as well. But these guys, hopefully I can give you an update here in a couple of weeks and show you how they're doing.